Hey guys, today we're going to be doing sublimation, and I'm going to be showing you exactly how to sublimate on a material called Prolight. And there are so many variables that you've got to keep in mind when sublimating on certain fabrics. So stick around and I'll show you how. Okay, the first thing we need to speak about is color. Now, I've been getting a lot of people call in and ask me about this certain issue. The issue is that when you are printing with your sublimation and you've gone and done a very vibrant design, once you go ahead and print it and sublimate it, you find that your colors aren't what you're seeing on your screen. Now, depending on the screen type and all of that nonsense, but the main issue that people are doing here, and which I'm about to show you now, is designing in CMYK and not RGB. And what I mean by that is, if you design in CMYK, the colors are a little bit more dull, but yes, the printer is CMYK. But what do I mean by that? So let me show you. So for instance, if we had to zoom in on our design here, and I go ahead and I show you, see over there, it says RGB, that's the color that this design is done in, and I go ahead and change it to CMYK, you can see the overall vibrancy of the color disappears completely. And if I change it back to RGB, you can see that vibrant color comes back. So my advice is, when you are wanting to design not to Pantone color, but just want an overall brighter design and more vibrant colors, rather design in RGB than CMYK. Now let's go back to talk about this actual design itself. So we've gone ahead and we've used the same design as we did on the jackets, but now we're doing it in golf shirt style. And I must say, I really like the colors. Obviously they're very vibrant, lots and lots of blue, lots of yellow, and the design is going to look crisp in my opinion. And remember, the way that you design this really matters to how it comes out once sublimated. Now let's talk about our Prolight material. The Prolight material is a very silky smooth material. It has no open in the gaps of the material, there's no opening weaves, so it's completely closed, and it has a really nice ultra sheen white looking to it. So with that in mind, when you're designing, you want to try and understand the material. Now, understanding the material has that very nice white sheen, so that means whatever you print is going to be very crisp and very vibrant. Opposed to, let's say, the shirt that I'm wearing, which is honeycomb and it has open weave. Now when you have an open weave shirt, that means you're going to lose a lot of detail in your print, purely because your texture of the material is going up and down. So from that, we know that we can send as much color as we want and have a very crisp and very detailed, fine detail on our design, and it will come out on the shirt. So from there, we have to talk about our material itself. Is it stretchable? Is it a solid material with no stretch? Now with Prolight, it has some stretch to it. It is a two-way stretch from side to side, and that being said, you also have to worry about shrinkage. Now every material out there shrinks a certain amount, so my best advice is print something on a smaller scale. Go ahead and do it on 100 by 100 square, print that, press it, and see how much it shrinks. Because you have to keep in mind that although you've done your artwork and everything to size, but once you've gone and sublimated, it is now shrunk to possibly 7 centimeters in total, which is quite a lot. And sometimes it can be the height that shrinks or the width, and you have to go and figure that out for yourself. In this case, Prolight will shrink 2 centimeters in height and roughly between 3 and 5 centimeters in width. Now, depending on where you get it from, your results may vary. So keep in mind when you're designing to always make it slightly bigger in those areas once you've gone ahead and done that test. Now with my material, as I've said, that's how it shrinks, so you'll need to go and do that test for yourself. Now once you've gone and done that, you need to now know that obviously the material stretches in a certain direction. So now you want to make sure that all your panels, as we can see here, it's now laid up as a complete mock-up, but if we had to look at the front panel, now you're wanting to print it in portrait, not landscape, purely because you want this shirt to stretch from side to side and not from top to bottom. It's no point. Why? Because as humans are, we grow widthwise and not tall. So you want to keep that in mind when you're designing things. Now that you've done your design, you now need to obviously go ahead to print. But before you go to print, you need to keep in mind that you have to section your shirt off into panels. Obviously, it's going to be stitched together into a shirt, so you just got to keep in mind that, like I said, the orientation of your design matters when you're printing. Now let's talk about printing in general. Now, depending on which type of paper you've got and the material that you're pressing, I highly recommend with AM's printer that you use a 130 gram or higher paper. Reason for that is because the AM printers put down quite a lot of ink, and if you have a very thin paper lower than 110 grams, you're going to find that when you actually print on the paper, it starts to warp. And once it's warped, you go ahead and you heat press it without it going back to flat. Again, you end up getting stretch marks, or you get portions of your material where there's no ink whatsoever. And that is due to the fact that, number one, your paper is saturated with too much ink. And having that said, if you reduce the amount of ink that you've got, you'll end up having a dull print. So you need to accommodate for your printer and have a higher grammage paper. So again, if it's too thin, it saturates too much with ink, then you end up getting a wobble effect or warped effect on your paper. And sometimes if you do not leave it long enough to go flat again on a roll, and you go heat press it straight away, you will find that your material will have blotches of areas with no color or less color, and stripes where the material has shrunk because the paper is too thin and it's overlapped and had streaks of white. So that being said, let's go to heat pressing. Now, my preferred temperature for ProLight is 126 degrees. Now, depending on which heat press you've got, but 120 degrees is the perfect temperature. It allows most of the ink to come off the paper and onto your fabric. You want to keep your tension of your roller just tight. Don't have it over tight or loose. It must just be to the point where you screw your screws forward, it mustn't be that you are overlocking those screws too far, and the bar mustn't be too far forward. That being said, if it is too tensioned and too tight, you end up having an effect where the material shrinks and it overlaps and leaves you with white streaks. Or you'll have an issue where the sides of your material is pressed perfectly and the middle has a dull patch. And that's purely because you've over tightened your belt and you've got patches of areas where the heat is transferring more than where it should evenly across the whole heat press. Now, when we go ahead and we heat press ProLight, we do not have to use our protection paper. And the reason for that is the protection paper is only there merely to prevent ink from transferring from your paper past your material and onto your mat. That is the worst thing that you could possibly do. It is something that you have to keep in mind when you're heat pressing on certain materials. But for ProLight, because there's no open weaves, there's no holes in it, you have no need for protection paper to be used here. Only in the instance where your print is wider than your material, then I recommend using protection paper. But keep in mind, protection paper will also prevent you from getting to the color spectrum that you want in certain areas when you're printing. So because it's an extra layer in between all of your paper and your material, it doesn't transfer the heat correctly in most places, so only use that when absolutely necessary. And once you've heat pressed, it's now just stitching the garment together. Okay guys, we've got our shirts back from stitching and I must say they look really good. Now I've made this process look very easy and I'm hoping that you guys find it easier that I've explained everything in detail. Now if you follow what I've explained and keep all those elements in the back of your head and keep them in mind, then you should end up with a product like this where you have got absolutely fantastic color, good quality printing, and you have got something that your customer is going to absolutely love. So thank you for watching and be ready for the next video.